got assigned to the company up in the hedgerows, and they had just come off of a pretty bad beating up a hill number. Everything was hill number, I don't know, 122 or something. Didn't make any difference. We were some of the first replacements that they got in, and that started the go-round. We were in the deep hedgerows, which is the best place in the world to defend and the worst place in the world to attack, especially if the people that you're attacking have been there for a year or two, know every place, had it all well zeroed in. You sat in one place too long, why, you got a mortar in your hind pocket, the left or right. It didn't make any difference. Till we got out of there and started across the country with General Patton, why, it was touch and go. But the first action that I really saw was Sevis Island, and that's was not a good experience. We went up through Bourg St. Leonard, which I remember because we got really shelled, and they were really trying to keep the gap open. The Falaise Gap was a place where 3 or 4 major highways went through a big set of rolling hills. They called them mountains, we called them hills, and they all came through the same place at this town of Chambois, which formed what they called the Gap, the Falaise Gap. And they were trying to get everything they could out of it. It was the worst mess you ever saw. I never have seen such carnage. We moved on up into the town of Chambois, went through the town, and set up in the edge of an orchard. We pulled in there at night and set up our machine guns to cover the field, which was where anybody could largely attack from us. There was a lot of noise across the field, but we couldn't tell what it was. It was getting dark. So we set up and bedded down. We'd been a long ways that day. When we got up at the crack of dawn, there's even more noise over there, and all of a sudden, it occurs to us when we could see real well, those are Germans making all that noise. And on top of that, they're lining up tanks and setting up guns. Well, we started shooting at the trucks and cars and stuff, and the people we could see running around, and the tanks were maneuvering, and pretty soon across the field they came. And one of the things you learned was you don't shoot 30 caliber machine guns at big tanks. And there's several reasons. First, it gets their attention, which you really don't want. And second, it makes them mad, which is even worse. And third, it doesn't do any good at all. It just does the first two things. But we shot off the infantry that they had for support. We could do that. A couple of trucks behind them, we managed to set them on fire. But as the tanks got closer, there wasn't anything we could do. And so the lieutenants that was with us and the sergeant says, sit tight, until they get real close. Because if they're real close, they can't see very well. And if you've shot off their infantry, they do that. Well, we waited till they got right in almost amongst us, and then we took off. We went back across the stream, set up in the farm, and the tanks milled around for a while, but with no support, they were vulnerable, so they backed off and went back across the field. Pretty soon they lined up to come up again, and we shot at what we could and then took off again and back towards, well, we'd got up some tank destroyers, which were we finally learned that our Shermans couldn't outgun an 88. But we brought them up to the edge of the ditch, but they couldn't see through this orchard and all the sheds and stuff that were there. And we're back screaming at them, get those tanks off of us, and they said, we can't see them, we can't shoot them. Well, then comes the idea, maybe early on shell shock or something, I don't know. I can see where they are, and I can see you. If I show you where they are, will you fire blind? And then we'll correct. And they said, sure. So, all right, and I lined it up myself and say that small building there, which were made just out of almost loose stones. There's a big tank right behind that one. You aim at me, and I'll line up. I'll get out of the road, and then you shoot. And those guys are good. They would put an armor piercing through the building, and then followed up with an HE. And they never parked in wide open. They parked behind trees or bushes or something, and they knocked out 2 tanks and chased another one off, and that was working. I'm still out in the middle, feeling pretty smart, and hiding behind an apple tree, apple orchard. Well, I didn't see the 3rd tank or the 4th tank or whatever one it was, and he shoots me right through the apple tree. French apple trees are not worth a damn. Bullet penetrated the tree and most of the way through my leg without ever hitting anything vital. What the sensation is, I don't recommend it, but felt like being hit with a sledgehammer. And I honestly couldn't tell you whether I had a leg, didn't have a leg, it was busted, or I could run like hell. Tank is coming after me. He quit shooting. I guess he's going to run over me. I don't know. Maybe he thought he didn't need to. And real quick decision, either I can run like hell or this is it. And I took off out of there like a screaming bullet. Ran around the corner of a building and fell over another tank. This is one of the so-called humorous things that you like to remember later. Clang. I ran into that thing. It must have made a terrible racket. Fell down, looked up, and there's a German up in the turret trying to assess the situation. I suppose a tank commander maybe. And for once, thank goodness for training, I was still carrying my rifle. And I recovered before he did and shot him. He went plunk down the tank, and I went zip again back towards Mother. Mother, that's the 2 tank destroyers. The tank's right behind me. They said that I got about 40, 50 feet from the ditch, and he went zip down in the ditch. I'm snuggled up between dead horses, cows, Germans, in this creek in the bottom. Anyhow, when the smoke cleared, they knocked out a couple of the tanks, damaged the other ones, so they left, and came down in the ditch and dragged me out. Said they had to pour some water over me before they could get too close to me. I'm deaf in a post. Got me up the top and checked me out to see that other than the hole in my leg, which at the speed I'd come in wasn't too bad, washed me down. I went over to an aid station, and the doctor slaps a super Band-Aid on it and said, "You want to go to the hospital?" And I said, "No, I'm still mobile." And once they closed the gap and the prisoners started, as soon as we shot up to the last tanks, white flags started popping up. We'd had a lot of different people wounded and everything. And the problem was, once they sent them to the hospital, we didn't get them back. And you get really attached. They say family ties are strong. The ties you get with the people you serve with like that are about as strong as they can get.
In Sherman tank, my function was the main gunner. The whole team was 5 of us. The commander of the tank, I was the gunner, then a loader and a radio operator, and then down in the front there was a driver and a second driver, which also had a machine gun in the bottom. So now, my very beginning, when we went in a battle not very far from Caen, was a little shaky. After a couple of days, you get used to it. So when you see killed people, killed soldiers, you don't react. It's only first day that you are shaking. And after that, well, it's like nothing, because your affection is different, because you get used to it. Until we got on that hill 262, the Falaise. That was a hell. I don't know how many vehicles we destroyed. We lost 5 tanks. In my tank, we got 2 anti-tank bullets. One bullet hit the transmission where the oil flown everywhere and a fire started. So in a tank, the oil was burning, so now the main driver was killed, second next to him was killed. I was shocked and lost my power to do anything. I was halfway, didn't know what to do. But the loader, he got out first. The commanding, he jumped out from the tank. The loader and the radio operator, by me, he got out, and I hardly came to the tower, to the opening on the top. And he helped me out. He grabbed me in here by my arms in here, and he helped me to pull me out. But he left me halfway hanging. He fell because he burned more inside, because the flame was going through the hole, and my legs were burning. By the time I got out, so one thing I remember up to today, for a moment I was thinking, what is heavier, the legs or my head? If the legs are heavier, I slip again. I didn't have any power to move if my head, then maybe so, and I fell by the tank and lost my memory and conscience. And that was all. When I woke up, I was about, well, maybe 300, maybe 500 yards away in the woods, and somebody covered me with some kind of a blanket. But already my blood was all over, and I was burned, my hair burned, and what was left on me is on this side. But this side was already completely burned. My trousers on one legs, and so anyway, my legs were burned very, very bad. So I lay down for a couple hours, and we were laying on one path. Maybe there was about 40 of us or 30. And the German came, and they were hitting a little one officer because somehow they felt that he knows German. And they were asking if he speak German and so on. And he said, no, but they were just playing with him. And that was about an hour. Then suddenly our unit came, they ran away. So my fighting was short because between Caen and Falaise, that was over a month. And that was all.
When they formed us up to drive on to Falaise, they had the armor unit up front, including the British Churchill tanks. They brought those in, and they lined us up all 10 abreast, the tanks, and the Churchill tanks had flamethrowers with them. They pulled a tank behind it, an armored tank behind holding the fluid, and the line ran through the tank, and they shot the fluid out the front end they would hit anywhere from 150 to 200 yards with fluid. It would burn and just burnt everything in front of them. And behind that were the Sherman tanks, and then after that the Bren gun carriers, which were a British Canadian unit, full track armored vehicle, open on top, but. And then behind that came the softskins, and we all rode. We were riding. In fact, I was in scout platoon. We weren't necessary to be out front. We were in the back, riding in a softskin vehicle, as the rest of the division was. The rest of the Argylls were anyway. And so we rode in these vehicles and went right across country, about 20, 25 miles, and just
I don't know, it was just hilarious to see this thing all lined up moving. And it was like a Wild West show, really. The fellows were shooting their guns off and yelling and screaming and having a ball. In the meantime, they're out front, they were burning up the Germans as they went with these tanks and just swept right across country. It was really a sight to behold that I would probably never see again and never would. But it was really worthwhile to see. The regular German soldier was just like anybody else. And they were just guys. I mean, they were easy to get along with, and some of them were happy to get captured, you know. But not the SS. The German soldiers themselves, they were frightened of the SS themselves, okay? Because sometimes if they were told not to retreat, they had the SS behind them to make sure they didn't retreat, you know, and they shoot their own men. And this P-38 that I took off this officer, we were on a sweep, and I was about to walk up. We were stationed over maybe 50 or 75 yards apart, and I came across this walkway up, driveway up into the barn, and I was going to go up into there, see if there's anybody up there. And all of a sudden, a person yelled from a ditch, he said, "Don't go up there, you better come down here with me." Spoke in very broken English, and I jumped in the ditch with him. And he was a veterinarian, and he was educated in England, and thus the broken English. But I took his gun from him, and he said, "There are 3 SS in that barn, and they'll kill me just as quick as they'll kill you." So I fired a couple of shots off to get the other guys to come around, and we got the 3 SS out of there. One of the guys got up and threw a grenade and got them out. Didn't hit anybody, but they got them out. In another case, the next day we were out doing another sweep, and we ran across a whole platoon of SS. And we had a little battle fight with them, killed 2 of them before they gave up. And but they were miserable. They were just really, really, really bad. I mean, they were bad to deal with, you know, not friendly, not anything, just really bad. At the Falaise Gap, when the Germans were trying to break through, that was the worst scene I've ever seen or ever want to see ever. The Germans kept trying to push out, and they kept just mowing them down. And the Germans used a lot of horses. And the horses were piled up, and the bodies were piled up, and they just kept trying to break out. That was a really horrendous experience. We were just scattered along an area. In fact, where we were, the Germans from the battle before were still laying there. You know, so we were just kind of. It was at night, and we were around a farmyard actually. And in fact, later on, when the Germans had stopped them, and we were going back, and it was so dark that you couldn't see your hand in front of you almost. And I never will forget, another fellow and I were heading back towards the barn, and we ran smack dab into a cow and scared the devil out of us because we didn't know there was a cow there, and you couldn't see it. That's how dark it was. That was unusual because always, usually at night, you'd see something, but that was a very dark night. But we got the word that to pull back, since they knew at some point in time they knew the Germans had quit. So the scout platoon got pretty well depleted by the time we got to Germany. From originally altogether maybe 30 guys, it wound up being about 10 by the time we got to Germany. The depletion got pretty heavy. I've often said that I'd never do that again, never volunteer again. But I wouldn't trade my experience for anything I've ever had, anything I've ever done. I think those 5 years I spent in the Army taught me more than I could have ever learned in any kind of schooling operation.